No, it sounds perfect. What is okay for you?
One sec.
You can't hear me, no.
Try that again.
Um, I don't want to say testing 1, 2, 3 because that's just too corny, isn't it? Like testing one, two,
It's a
three.
bit quieter now, but yeah, it should be
Bit
fine.
quieter. Is it okay? Are you all
Yeah,
right?
it's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, I've no
You?
feedback at all. Yeah. How'd you get Christmas over? All right.
Yeah, it's all right. We just normal stuff. Just me, the wife, and the dogs chilling out with a bit of snow.
Nice and relaxing. Did you get anything nice for
Yeah.
Christmas?
New rear light for the bicycle, and I just keep people keep asking, and I keep forgetting. I feel like a bad person. I'm like, oh shit, I've forgotten what I got.
Did you
I
give
got,
it? Did you give anything nice for Christmas? That tells you a lot about your
Of course I did.
personality. You see? Can't.
Yeah, I quite look. It's almost like the competitive nature comes into the giving of presents. But
I was
can't remember those either.
I was hoping to get a new set of curtains, as you can see there.
Oh yeah, they're shit, aren't they? What's going on there?
They are so bad.
Got a
Like,
couple of uncles that'd like them, but a couple of uncles that would very much dislike them.
yeah, no, this they're my son's curtains, by the way. I need to get them removed.
Oh, right. You
Um,
can only take them so far, can't you?
I
I
actually,
remember what I got. What did I get? No, I forgot 'em. Oh, I got a T-shirt from my father-in-law that was a prize my wife won in the 1990s. It was a Chumbawamba T-shirt because Boff Wally, the lead singer, used to run for their club. So we gave a load of Chumbawamba gear as prizes. She won it back in the early 90s. And it's my first tape was Chumbawamba, first album. And I don't think they knew that. But they sent it over because it's worth 200 quid now, this T-shirt. It's hideous. It's brilliant. But it's like, yeah, I'm having that. And they're like, you can sell it if you want. I was like, I'm not selling it. It's got this really horrible, it's got like a baby's face on the front. I'll get it out at the end of the call and show you.
nice.
But it's brilliant.
Needs to go on the frame on the wall by the sounds of it.
Nah, just wear it until it's ragged.
I put my
Not
UTMB
worth
top
200
on.
quid anymore.
Put my UTMB top on because you were here
Look
today.
at that.
It hardly
I got some of them.
it hardly fitted because of Christmas. So it's like, shit, am I going to get this thing on or not? Like,
Composport.
it's like,
Yeah, that's always a challenge with Composport. Like, it's made for like live European men who've spent their life in the mountains just solely eating a bit of bread every now and again.
yeah.
I've gone for the woolly jumper. It's much safer.
Is it cold where you're at the minute? You're in Italy at the minute, are you?
It's kind of zero. I don't know if you'll see out the window.
Oh, very nice.
We had some fresh snow yesterday, so I had a tempo run today, and there was some ice dodging involved. Just the odd melted snow trickling across the road. Just so if you put your foot on it wrong, you're out of there. So it's not too bad.
So you're back running them.
I'm dabbling in 35 to 45 miles a week, alongside some biking still as well. But
Okay, nice to get
I'd like
that.
to dabble a bit more.
Nice to get that sort of transition, sort of moving in between both.
Yeah, like you can't, like I can't get the training I want from just solely swapping straight back to running, because I'd end up with just 30 to 45 miles a week without any additional, like the volume would drop overall. So with the bike, and I'm still loving the biking, even in this fucking weather. So I got a couple of bike races I'm signed up to this year, next year still. So I'm going to try and combine the two.
Do you think that's helping then, keeping you disciplined then, keep your mileage down in the running? It's a bit coming back from injury, is it? Or are you disciplined enough?
I mean, physically, there's a limit to how much I can run at the moment anyway, so that limits me. I can't. If I try and do more, I'll just pull up an injury. So because it's not like the injury is still technically without a diagnosis. But it's kind of, what can I get? What if I keep growing stronger, keep reconditioning my legs? Because I've taken basically a year off running, so the legs were like, "What are you doing? We're not built for this anymore." So
We're
there's
not
only
built
so
for
much I
walking.
can do. Yeah, this running luck. God, it's my calves mainly, because I don't think you use them on the bike as much, and I've been running more on my midfoot, and that's kind of just led to the calves having had a year off, then being asked to do a lot more work. So that, I think I'm having a bit of that's the discipline comes from the feedback from my calves.
Yeah, and that's the problem with it, isn't it? When you start moving things about, other things you start losing that balance within your body. Like,
I made the mistake of when I got injured. I don't know how we want to. I'll start chatting, and you might want me to say it again in a minute.
No. I don't do any prep at all, Rob. I just sort of go off the cuff. So that's the way it sort of works. I hate being scripted, you see. I don't like being scripted. Whatever way it flows, it flows. Listen, I was having a conversation with a guy about an hour ago. Well, about an hour and a half ago. And he's a marathon runner. He's never done ultras before, and we were having a debate on the World Ultra and what it actually meant. And he was just like, anything over a marathon's an ultra. I guess it means a bit more than that, though. And he's like, I tried to explain to him then what I thought the World Ultra meant. So that's where we're going to start. What does the word ultra mean to you? Yeah.
There's two answers to that anyway, but I'll let you start there. Go on. Who was you speaking to beforehand?
He's a friend. He's a marathon runner. No, he's not an ultra runner.
I wouldn't know him. So because of all the fast running stuff we do, I'm reasonably keyed into UK and Irish kind of marathon running as well. More so than I probably need to be.
No, this guy's around a 3.5 hour marathon. I was going to say he wasn't on the podcast, but that made it sound like you won't get on the podcast unless you can break 3 hours.
Well, you got to think, you got to then counter him, right? Because you can look at ultra running from time basis. So you could say to you, well, I mean, technically, 3.5 hours, you're already basically doing an ultra, mate. It's just
an extra
I won't say
half.
that when you're recording.
Well, we are recording, so.
It's just not recording. Oh, you're recording it elsewhere.
You didn't fall. You didn't fall for that, did you?
Trick me.
So what attracts you to ultra running then? What does the word ultra mean to you?
What does the word ultra mean to me? I mean, in recent years, it's ultra endurance. Is anything that kind of pushes you into that further realm of I don't know, survival. That's getting a bit extreme. If you look at the likes of, I've always chatted about this with Dan Lawson. Yanis Kouros felt that, and he, for those who don't know Yanis, he's probably one of the greatest. He's the greatest ultra runner of all time. And he said that until it comes down to the mind, he doesn't feel like it's an ultra. When you're running on physicality alone, and for him, that was getting to the 24-hour. Says anything below that was he didn't kind of refer to as ultra running. So that's an even more probably a controversial way of looking at it. And I can see where he's coming from, because 100k is a physical thing. You run fast. Your training doesn't need to be too dissimilar to the marathon. You're fueling like you would in a marathon, but for a longer amount of time. You're running as if you would in a marathon, but for a longer amount of time. And you hope the wheels don't come off. And when they do, you do your best to kind of hang on for dear life. Whereas when it comes to something like the 24-hour, and again, this is a timed format, so it's like running around in a loop. As long as you can, as far as you can, not as long, the length is always the same. But it doesn't matter if you're sat on the floor crying or running as fast as you can. You've got to motivate yourself to get the most out of any given moment. And that to me then brings the mind into it from the start. Because at the start of 100k, you're running fast, you're feeling good. It doesn't become hard until it's hard. Same for maybe the 100-miler. It doesn't become hard until it's hard. The 24-hour, there's a mental element to it that from the start, it's pointless. You're just running in a small circle and you've got to motivate yourself. So then that kind of brings the mind into it from the get-go. So the ultra for me is running a long way, cycling a long way, skiing a long way. It doesn't matter hiking a long way. You can still, there's the Long Distance Walkers Association have their annual 100-miler. Those guys it's ultra endurance. But it's when the mind comes into play. It's when your mental toughness, your mental resilience is key to your success at that event. That for me is ultra. But that might not, and that's changed over the years as well. I used to just say it was anything over. If you get lost on a marathon and take an extra half mile, then you're an ultra runner. You
almost described it there as a drug. You know, that place that place that you get to though. You know, I'd no races done in 2019 due to COVID. But I went for a training one day. It was 52 miles across the mountains. I got to mile 44 and I sat down, feeling a bit sorry for myself. No, I had it actually easy up to mile 44. I actually came out today just for this moment to get to this place so I can try and push through that. And, you know, when I finished the 52 miles, I looked back at mile 44 and thought, oh, that was great. Like, that's exactly why I came out today. You know, it's that hit and that fix. It's a bit crazy, like, when you look at it that way.
Why do you describe it like a drug?
Well, when you talk about that dark place,
Two dogs.
It sounds like
fighting in my room.
It sounds like they're doing Irish dancing, because I can't see it. All I can hear is the. I thought they were doing a bit of tap dancing there.
Let me try and get them out of the room in a second. Guys, out.
Does that work? Does it, guys?
For one of them,
out.
And then the other follows. Out. It works because the big one goes and the little one goes, well, I want to bite the big one's ankles, so I better go as well.
So why did I describe it as a drug? I suppose, like, I'm surprised how much I missed it this year, you know, with all the races, you know, and previous to that, I'm relatively new to ultra distances, like, so I'm going to have to say I did CCC. I'm getting a lot of stick for mentioning that on the podcast, by the way. I need to do more racing, so I've got new races to talk about. Richard Noonan, I apologise. I mentioned CCC again.
Don't apologise to Richard Noonan. Blimey. That's for your mistake.
Yeah, big time. But, you know, I was failing through these races, but I was really enjoying the learning that I was getting. I was able to go deeper and deeper every time I went out. And at the end of every race, I was excited to do the next one because I was learning so much on that journey, you know, and I felt I was able to go deeper and deeper every time I went, even though it was a sufferfest for me. And, you know, I suppose that growth that I was getting through the race.
So you're looking for the improvement. That's what I think you find with a lot of runners is they, especially at the start, because the gains are so big at the start, right? Even just if you're going couch to 5K, you feel that self-improvement. And that's what, I think for me, that's one of the things that becomes, not addictive, but very, very satisfying. Yeah. But you can do that without races. It sounds like you were just digging a big hole and then just like looking at your hole and then digging it a bit deeper the next time and going like, how could I keep digging this hole?
Trying to avoid the hole, by the way. By the way, I was trying to fine tune it so I was avoiding the hole. But when I eventually fell into it, then I was trying to work out how to get myself back out of it.
Yeah.
So I do know that the trick isn't to fall into the hole and suffer. You know, the trick is to try and get through the race without falling into the hole.
No holes.
Yeah, but I was, you know, there was two sides of it for me. I was getting further and further in the race, you know, without getting into the deep, dark place, like, and then I was able to accept what was going on a lot more and not resist it. So then I felt that would just flow through and I could keep on going on until that then, bang, at some point in the race, it was going to knock me over. But it was just a different level of suffering for me that a different level of acceptance, should I say, rather than suffering. If that makes any sense, like, but
I mean, I've been doing the last 18 months because of an injury. I've been doing some bike racing, and I've been suffering with this injury for about 3 or 4 years now. And it stopped me going too long, and I was on the cusp of stepping up to 48 hours and longer because I was looking for that same. I mean, I wasn't looking for the hole. But I wasn't finding the hole as often as I'd like in the shorter events. And I thought that my mindset was around trying to improve, say, the 24-hour distance by going to 48-hour, by going to 72 6-day racing, and going through the ups and downs of that to then come back to the 24 and go, almost a little blasé at that point about a 24-hour race. But I've never had an easy 24-hour race, but to kind of come back and to have learned more. I don't know, to learn from each kind of hole you get to. And on the bike, it's a hell of a lot easier to push until you get to those points because it's not about your muscles. Like in an ultra race, your muscles can give up your ankles, your knees, your hips, your back, and that's I'm quite good at the nutrition, the pacing, the mental side of things. It's my body that's letting me down. Whereas the biking allowed me to get to those points where, oh, hold on a second, I just keep going until I burst into tears. Brilliant. Turns out it takes like a couple of nights without sleep, and then it happens. And it was quite nice to be able to get to those points again, right? Like the same as you at the stage you're at. I'm still at that. I'm still looking for those. I don't know, those deep dark lessons that
It's the opportunity for growth, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
life doesn't really present them to you. I see it like this band of highs and lows that you go through in life. Ultra running gives you that. You have higher highs and lower lows, so it increases your bandwidth for life. That's a bit deep, but there's an element of that. There's an element of that there.
And definitely when the races start lasting 2, 3, 4, 5 days, it becomes. I mean, it's less of like it's less of an analogy for life. It's just your life is on a bike for 5 days. You're like, right, well, I'm just going to get through all of this. And there's all kind of like it's physiological factors as well. Like, so I've been looking at what makes us feel sleepy in those nights. And there's this. I spoke to one doctor who said it's a build up of this adenosine, and the more it builds up in your head, and the only way to get rid of it is through sleep. We take caffeine and it blocks the receptors, but it's still there. So then the caffeine wears off and you're sleepier than ever before. And you're waiting for your circadian rhythm to get you through to the light coming in the next day to kind of perk you up a bit. And the only way to dissipate it is to sleep. So you try micro sleeps, but also if you're fueling and not kind of, if you're, how was it described? Metabolic demand doesn't outweigh supply, you're less likely to build up more of this adenosine in your brain. So if you're fueling well, you're not going to feel as sleepy going through the night, and it's all kind of like, so you can either attack the what's happened, or you can try and stop it happening, or you can do both. So you use the caffeine, you have the micro sleeps, but you also try and fuel properly. And so the last bike race I did, for the first night, I just didn't feel sleepy at all. It was great. And then after about 36 hours, my body was like, well, the sleep isn't stopping him. Let's try overwhelming despair, and that got me into a bed for a few hours.
Do you start hallucinating on the bike then? Were you pushing that hard?
Yeah, I did. I did one in the summer that was 5 days long, and I went through the first night. Second night was a couple of hours sleep on the floor of a shop, and then there was like 90-minute sleeps the following nights. And the last night I was finishing, and I started to see like, every rock face was, and I've never had it in an ultra, but every rock face was a sculpture, and I was like, right. And before this, I'd had really, really vivid deja vu, and it was fascinating. Yeah. So I was like, I've been up here before. I've totally been up this climb, and I've never been to the region before. I was like, I know where this is going to be. I recognise that building. And basically, apparently, what happens is your brain crosses the wires and stores what you see. Instead of in the short-term memory, straight into the long-term memory. So you see something, and then instantly it's in your long-term memory. You're like, I remember that from, I don't know when. And then you see, and then you're trying to convince yourself, the next one. If I have been up here before, I'll recognise what's around this next bend. And you go around the bend, you go, I remember all of this from before. But you can't tell what's around the next bend before you get there. But when you get there, you've seen it all before. And then I start. And that was because the finish was close. I was pushing through. I think I've been cycling for 30 hours at that point without sleep. And then you get. I started seeing all these sculptures in the rock, and I was like, and the worst bit was, I remember this village. This is the village with all the sculptures in the rocks, and every rock was like it had been chiseled out for a face or stuff, and it was all kind of. And then I realised, and you're very conscious of it happening. You're like, and the logical part of your brain's going, well, that doesn't make any sense, mate. What are you doing? You've never been here before, and it's beautiful. It was in this beautiful valley above Nice, and then like the night goes on, and the mind plays tricks in the poor light and stuff. But I'm still seeing all these kind of just sculptures, and then the best bit about that, and I was falling asleep on a downhill after that, which is obviously treacherous because there was big drop-offs. And I'm slapping myself, and I know I'm within. You're close to the finish, but you're still 50 miles away, and that's kind of in a 2,000-kilometer race. It just screws you in your mind. You're like, oh, what's the point? They know I'm going to finish. They might as well come and collect me. And then I'm going downhill trying to stay awake. I'm too close to have a sleep. I'm in 10th place. 11th is not too far behind. Just a couple of hours. If I sleep for a couple of hours, he'll catch me. And fortunately, as I'm going down this dark road, from the side, this wild boar runs out from the shade, right? And I'm like, people are like, oh, did you hallucinate that? No, 100% real. He ran alongside me for maybe 4 or 5 seconds, At which point you could see he was like, do I smash this geezer to pieces, or should I just go back into the bushes? I just screamed the word boar at it repeatedly, just in case it was unaware of its species. And then after that, no problems with sleep whatsoever. The adrenaline was coursing, so I got to the finish.
So that's one of your tricks then, is it? Pull out a wild boar.
Yeah, I used that. You can just a real shock to the system if you've got a runner and you're crewing them in a 24-hour and they're sleepy. If you can go around the corner and maybe dress up as some kind of murderer and jump out from the bushes, you will help them with their sleep, but you may lose your friendship.
Yeah, you're flicking their mind from that whole survival, that protective mind and your survival mind, isn't it? It's that tipping into that 20% extra. So do you like the science aspect of it and unpacking that and trying to work out that puzzle, I suppose?
Yeah.
When you're talking about the sleep stuff and what's going on, and because it's all about chemicals in the brain, isn't it, and what's being released and things like that.
It's a mixture, isn't it? What's the term? Psychobiological. Well, I did a master's in performance coaching the last couple of years with University of Stirling, and one of my lecturers, Andrew Kirkman, he loved the whole mixture of things. Of like, it's not physical, it's not psychological, it's a mixture of everything. So there are physiological aspects of like chemicals in the brain, but then there's also the psychological side of things of how we interpret that and how our current context, our current environment change how we interpret that. So I do enjoy that side of things. When Dan Lawson and I were running across Jordan, the main camera guy, Dave McFarland, he said to me, he's like, "You're really logical." And I'd never seen myself as logical at that point. Maybe just compared to Dan, I was logical. I was thinking like, Dan's an oddball, right? So like, we're all logical. But he said every problem that arose, I tried to explain it. If one of us was sleepy, one of us was fatigued, one of us was slowing down, I had a reason to explain it. And Dan was more like, "Oh yeah, man, the universe has just decided to slow us down right now." I'm like, "No, Dan, you're just not eating anything, you clown." So then it would be like that yin and yang kind of thing. So yeah, I like to explain as much as I can, but I also appreciate there's some of the stuff that matters we can't explain. So
we're also very individual as well, isn't it? It's our bodies and minds change things and absorb things differently.
We are very much a product of many years, rather than just the ultra running. What you did before you were an ultra runner will massively feed into how you run and how you cope with situations and how and what you want out of each individual ultra marathon. It all changes from all the past.
You mentioned Dan Lawson there. I actually raced with Dan at the beginning of the year.
Did you?
The backyard in
Same race or alongside him?
Same race. We actually sat next to each other. It was the backyard in February, Castle Ward.
Right, yeah.
Me and him were in the hut together. And he doesn't like the cold.
No, he doesn't.
He walked in and he was just going on how cold it was. And I was in a pair of shorts, and he was like, "What's going on here? It's February. Storm Dennis is outside the door." He was not happy.
I coached Dan as well, so he's a good friend, and I coach him. So I was back and forth with him in that one. It was a really interesting, because you could speak to him each hour, you could message back and forth. It was a really interesting coaching experience, and I guess he wanted to try it out to see if he was suited to that. He has to move Dan. That stopping, not just the cold and the weather was not great for him, but the stopping every hour would have driven. He would have just wanted to keep moving. Yeah. That man loves to move, and that stopping would have just been antithesis to his being. Like, he would have been like, "No, I want to just keep." I imagine him jogging on the spot for the 15 minutes. But yeah, because his legs after that, I don't know if he reacted to something it's really weird, because his legs all scabbed up afterwards. Because he wore shorts the whole time. Yeah, he's cold, but he's wearing shorts, of course. And he was like, "My legs are really sore, man." And he sent it, and I was looking like, they're just cold, dude. And then a week later, they're just full on cuts and scabs, and you're like, "Did you run through brambles or something?" And he's like, "No, just something." He didn't have a good time there at all, did he?
No, it was I actually pulled out. I think it was mile 52. I was behind my training for the Dolomites, which didn't happen. So I sort of regret not pushing on. Like, I didn't want to get wiped out, because an event like that can totally wipe you out.
You can't enter an event like that with something else
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
back burner.
Well,
what are you doing?
That actually was the takeaway from that. You know, you can't have a backyard as a bee race. Definitely not.
No.
Because as soon as it starts getting tough, then it's like. But I remember I sat on, and we were privileged. There's a very small house at the start and finish line that we were in. All the privileged people get in there if you pay 50 quid. But but I remember the door flying open, like, with this Storm Dennis, and there was Dan standing in the doorway, like, thunder and lightning behind him, like this silhouette. Just through the flash, you can see his face, like, and I thought, thank God I pulled out. But the Jordan was how far was that? Like 600 odd kilometers.
Yeah, I think so. 650? I can't remember.
Yeah,
just under 10 days.
Do you prefer that type of, because you've done so much? That's one thing about, you know, you have such a range from 5K. I think it was Armagh. Was it Armagh?
I didn't have a great race at Armagh, but yeah, I enjoyed that. I've done a 3K race once. Got boxed in by like an 11-year-old on the first bend.
The Armagh race is phenomenal, though, isn't it? Like, I think
fantastic experience. Yeah.
I did take a look at your time.
It's
it's still 15 minutes.
Like a big man.
15 minutes and something.
That's what we're all there for, aren't we? Everyone's at Armagh for under 15 minutes. And the second you realise you're not going to get under 15 minutes, is what I said, and there's a lesson in that. The second I realised, I think on the third lap, that I was a few seconds off per lap getting my target, my head dropped completely. I think I ran 15:25 in the end.
Yeah, I wrote down your time there. It was 15:27, but you were 160.
Yeah, it was 25. It was definitely 25. I got it on the. I saw it down in the results as 27, and I was like, if he's done his research, I'm gonna look like a bullshitter. 15:25 it was.
And
but it should have been. I was probably in 15:10, 15:15 shape, and I set off trying to run sub 15, and then my head dropped because of that. And like the third and the fourth K, I was like, oh, that's the point. And like the 5K is that kind of, you are pushing yourself the whole way. It's that, in a way, yeah, you just from the start to finish, it's uncomfortable because that's where you've got to be. And it's brilliant, but if you let anything kind of convince yourself. And a friend of mine, I remember, I loved it because a friend of mine, Nigel, he was trying to run, like, I think he had a PB of like 14:30 at the time, 14:40. And he went off. It was brilliant because he had his watch on and it broke at the start. So he was just like, right, I'm going to pace with the people I expect to be around. And he was going around and he was like, I should be, yes, it's about where I should be. And he ran, I think, 13:54 in the end. And like part of that was, like, and I trained with this guy in Portugal. He's like his friend of mine. And you're like, part of it's because he's just, oh, I'm supposed to be here. Had he had the watch, he would have shit his pants. He'd have been like, oh, I'm going too fast. Oh no, what's going on? But he didn't have the watch. It was gone. So he was like, well, that geezer's usually 5 seconds ahead of me. This one's normally next to me. We're all and they're all having a fast race. And it was like, I think if he had his watch working, the first couple of miles would have scared the hell out of him. But he didn't. And he ran, and he's broken 14 since then as well. But it was like, so I really enjoyed the experience there. If you're into your road running, you've got to try an event like Armagh because it's just,
yeah, you
proper.
You were 166th place with 15:25. You know, it shows you what type of race it is, though. You know what I mean? And so many people knock their PBs out there for the very reason of what you've just said. You know, everybody just carries each other over.
No choice but to run fast, or you're going to get run over by like 100 stick men. So it's like you just at the start as well. I'm not a big geezer, but I felt like I'm looking around and there's this kind of sinewy looking. Like, of all ages, I was like, right, this is going to get a bit rowdy at the start, and it's not often I feel comfortable in that. I was like, right, I'm one of if it comes to blows, I'm all right here. Everyone was so thin, and they're just like, shit me, this is. But yeah, it was great because you just kind of bolter in, and you've got no choice but to run. If you're not running sub 15-minute pace for that first K, you're just literally at the back on your own. Everyone's there with one goal on their mind, and well, not all. Everyone. Some people are running much faster than that, but. It's a good experience.
How do you maintain that balance and that range then? So, like, because you've done 100 miles and you land, what was your PB in your 100 miles? 15 hours? Or something?
So my quickest 100 still within a 24 hour, I think 14:40 something.
Wow.
And then I went on to run a little bit more after that. So like, I've never done. I mean, yeah, the last proper 100 on its own, not including like UTMB, would have been South Downs 100. So last time I did fast, which was back in 2013.
Right.
So yeah, I was going to run one last autumn. That's what when I picked up this injury, that's what I was training for, and I was going to aim for a fast time. I wanted to try and see if just how quickly I could do it.
Do you think it's important to have your sort of 5K pace down around that time then to see it move through the 100 miles?
The training's very different. So it depends. There are different types of runners. You look at someone like Dan Dawson's or Mark Perkins, who ran just over 12 hours for 100 miles. So you'd look at his 5K time at that time. It wouldn't have been anything spectacular. He was a very lightweight, very kind of flighty ultra runner. I think there's different types of ultra runners. And then you look at someone like Tom Evans. He's a brute of a man. He's got a lot of muscle to him. He's got a very fast like 5K time. He's well under 14 minutes now. And there's plenty of the whole range in between. I think it depends on the type of ultra runner you are. If you're for the majority of us, an improvement in your 5K time is going to help improve your 100-mile time. But it's not as simple as that. And often, if you're training for 100 milers and you're seeing your 5K time drop at the same time, great, that's a really good sign. If you're training for 100 milers and you do a block of solely 5K training, that's not 100% going to help you for the 100-mile race coming up. It might help you for the 100-mile race in 12 months' time because or in 6 months' time, because you're taking that speed. You might take that speed into a marathon block, and then you do a marathon and you've increased your marathon time, and then you step it up. But it's not like, if I go out and do a month of mile training, I'm not going to run quicker for 24 hours because it's the specificity's gone. So I think, yeah, it's like overall fitness. If you can improve it, it's going to help, but you do need that specific training for the event you're doing. And 100 miles is about running. It's a much slower pace than you're going to run over your 5K, and it varies as well, because you could talk into someone who runs 100 miles in 28 hours. It's very different talking to someone who's going to run it in 13, 14 hours. One of those people's 5K paces is closer to their 100-mile pace, and they're going to improve it that way. But actually, if you're running in 28 hours, your 5K pace is going to help. But there are plenty of other things that are probably going to make an even bigger impact, such as your nutrition, working on your kit, trying to talk to checkpoint staff a little bit less, and just sitting down, not having as many cups of tea. There's loads of different aspects to it. So it will help. But I would say if you're specifically training, if you wanted to, especially right now with no races, if you use a 5K time trial every 3, 4, 5 weeks, it might give you an idea of your fitness improving. But if that's improving because you're specifically training to improve that time trial, rather than doing the training that's right for the races and the goals you've got, then it might not help as much as someone who's seeing it improve as a byproduct of their ultramarathon training.
Yeah, and it's very important, obviously, to, it depends on what your goal is. Obviously, whether it's a mountainous 100 miles, whether it's a flat, fast 100 miles, or whether it's a track 100 miles. What do you think are the most important building blocks for a 100-mile race? So, if it was...
Nutrition.
Nutrition is a key thing. Have you been listening to my podcast? I don't want to even unpack that.
No, I haven't done any research either, mate.
That's where it falls over for me every time. Most of the deep dark places I get to is because of my nutrition. My head's gone because of the lack of nutrition, obviously, in the fuel. But I'm crossing the finish lines feeling them fresh because my body hasn't given out. As such, my legs haven't given out, as my nutrition goes pear-shaped. I've got further and further through it, the more racing I'm doing. I'm getting to about 55, 60 miles now. And, I suppose everybody's so individual as well, a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, it is. But just like a friend of mine, Kingston Uni, Chris Howe, he did a study. He got I think 10, 15 runners to do 50 miles on a treadmill, and they all brought their own food in, and it was on a table next to them. They're on a treadmill, they can have whatever they wanted handed to them, and they all massively underate. These experienced ultrans, I think we all massively undereat. And the other side of that is, again, it's not as simple as just it is a simple for a lot of people. If you improve your nutrition, you improve your 100-mile times, but also your pacing, right? Because if you're going, my legs feel fine, so I wasn't going too fast, but I couldn't eat anymore. You go, well, if you'd have slowed down, could you have eaten more? Oh, maybe, yeah. Well, then you would have got to the finish line quicker, because running fast isn't the quickest way to the finish line. Running at a level that you can keep eating a sandwich is probably more effective for people, and that kind of, it's just understanding that it's not as simple as like, well, what do I need to eat? And then the other side of it is like, yeah, one, it's very individual. We've got to practice that stuff. We've got to make sure we're at the right effort level to be able to eat. You can look at where you are now and how you can improve it. I could sit here and reel off like, this is what you should be eating, but I don't know who's listening. Like if someone's out there and they're eating 20 grams of carbs an hour for their race and they're doing all right, and then you go, well, you're supposed to be eating 80 to 90 grams of carbs an hour. They try that and they just spend the most of their race like in the bushes. But that person eating 20 grams of carbs an hour, if they improve it to 30 or 40 with practice, they're going to see improvements. They're going to improve on their own individual situation. So the first thing to do with your nutrition, I don't like dishing out. And nutrition is one of the areas I think a lot of people dish out a lot of advice. I am studying the IOC Sports Nutrition Diploma, which is 2 years, which I can then convert over 6 months into a master's. So that I'm halfway through that at the moment. So I take it seriously. I don't just try and dish out advice willy-nilly. But the first thing you want to do is just look at what you're taking on board. Figure it out. Okay, what am I getting in per hour? How many carbs an hour am I getting on board? And what does that look like? And what does it break down? And then you start there. Then you can say, well, can I improve that a little bit? Does it need improving?
It's one thing. We had Sharon Gator on the podcast there. And one thing she said sort of hit home with me was like, she really struggled with nutrition. So she's just started writing it down, you know, and what went well, what didn't go well, when she took it, when she didn't take it. And she started learning from her picture. Now, most of us ultra runners, we think we're going to learn from our mistakes. But then, you know, 6 months later, you forget. But a lot of time you do the same mistake again.
I think I got a couple of books down here. Like every time I crew a 24-hour race, and I'm part of the management team for the British 24-hour squad and approve my own runners 24s, I write down everything they take on board. Mainly the carbohydrates, the fluid levels, and the electrolytes. And you have that as a record for afterwards, but also for during. Because 12 hours into a race, if you can look down and say, actually, they've taken on too much of this or too little of that, and the site's missing, we can explain what we're seeing in front of us. So I mean, if you're not writing that stuff down, especially in something as like set up as a 24-hour race, like you're just letting you're kind of missing an opportunity. Like we're down on the jog. Like I can tell you, he had 55 packets of beta fuel over the 10 days, and we made sure that each day. And Dan's not a prolific eater either. It's one of the things we've worked on, and that's an experienced ultra. He's a European 24-hour champion. I can remember in the second half of that European 24 hours, I was off the course because I was injured. And Dan, he was slowing down because he wasn't eating. We got some shot blocks in and he started perking up. We found something he could eat. And it's just like, the nutrition is a huge part of it. But you just got to look, if you're not noting, and you do it from memory, right? You get to the end of a race, it's not ideal. You're not going to sit at the end of the CCC. How many crackers did I pick up in that tiny mountain refuge when I was like, when I had the shits? I can't remember how many crackers I had. And if you carry little scales with you and weigh them, like that's not going to work. I mean, I'd have a little scales at a 24-hour race if I'm working stuff out. And it's not, again, like you've got the bottle and you work out how much you're missing, and then they come around and they swig out of a Coca-Cola bottle and you're like, oh, how do I measure that? Quick, just. But it doesn't have to be absolutely exact. But if you're not making the base efforts, and you go in with a plan, if you go in with a plan, right, and you work out what you intend to take on, that goes out. Obviously, it's probably going to go out the window at some point. But even that, you go through the process of working out, okay, what's in 100 mils of Coke? It's got 11 grams of carbohydrates. A Mars bar, like 20 grams. An SIS gel, 24 grams of carbohydrates. Okay, it's chocolate. What's at the race I'm doing? What's going to be at the checkpoints? Squares of chocolate, crackers, crisps. What's in those? And you build it up over time. You don't have to become like Rain Man straight away, remembering what the carb contents of every different little food you might take on board. But you start to build up that knowledge, and then in the middle of a race, oh God, what did I have last hour? I only had that Oreo, right, which is only 7 grams of carb, right? Okay, I got to get something more in. Let's have this banana. That's getting it up to 27. Cool. And then you're just building out that. And yeah, it doesn't have to be that complicated. I've not eaten enough carbs. I've got to eat more. Great. That's the basic level. If you can get that, but if you plan it out beforehand, that's not time wasted in a race at all. It's easy. It's part. If you haven't got time for it, have an extra rest day and spend it doing your nutrition plan. Don't do that 1 hour run. Right? If you're like, I haven't got time to write down nutrition, just scrap one of your runs, because it'll have a much bigger impact on your race than that 1 hour run ever will. I mean, if you're only running one time a week, maybe keep that in there and find some other time.
I was coming back from injury last year, so I did. There's a local marathon course, which goes about 4,000 feet around the side of the mountains, really. So I'd done it like 10 times in 9 weeks. But what I was doing, I was coming back from injury.
And you were injured. Is this because of the injury or coming back from it?
This was coming back. I'd actually tore a ligament, so. But it's a nice course. And, slowly and knocking like 10 minutes off every time I'd done it. But what I'd done, I used it for nutrition. So I was trialing something different every week to see what would work. And, I was trying maybe cliff blocks, and then I had tailwind with the cliff blocks, and there was too much sweetness. And then I refined that. And come the end of those 9 weeks, I had it really dialed in. The only problem I had was I used that everywhere then. And then my stomach started, no, actually, you've done this too much. And it started rejecting this perfect plan that I sort of created.
What, during your training runs or in the race?
In a race. Well, it was a race that actually had gone 12, 14 hours. So that fueling plan obviously kept me well up to about 8 hours. But it was that longer distance then that I wasn't actually exercising or training.
And that's hard, isn't it? Because, I mean, every long run is an opportunity to learn about your nutrition. And you're going to gain more than someone who says, well, you should do your long runs fasted. Well, one, that could interrupt your consistency. So it's going to hurt. You're going to more likely to damage your muscles over the course of that long run. But also, it's an opportunity to get an improvement for your race, for nutrition. So you're doing the right thing there. The problem we have is that come 8, 12, 16 hours into a race, the only time you're going to kind of practice that and troubleshoot is during the race itself. So you can either say, well, it's going to take me 5 years to get to know what happens in 16 hours. And there are still people who've been doing 24 hours. I mean, you take Sharon Gator there. She's been running for at a high level for 20 years, 25 years. And she's still thinking about it. So I suppose and that's when you try and break it down into component parts, right? You start logging it. And you go, okay, well, I'm taking on tailwind, right? And the shot blocks, and it's working really well. And this is how much fluid I'm having. So what electrolytes am I getting on board with that? Because, I'm a big fan of, so I'm sponsored by Precision Hydration. They do their sweat tests, and you can look at the sodium concentration of your sweat, what you're losing. And what we try and do is match what's going in with what's coming out. So you've got runners who sweat like 500 milligrams of sodium per litre. And you've got some of my runners, one of them's up 2,044 milligrams per litre. So most of us are sitting at like 1,000, right? It can vary slightly, but it's kind of genetic. So that's your sweat rate. We change how much we sweat rather than the concentration of sodium in it if we need to get rid of something. But then if you kind of look at that, so 8 hours, maybe you're 200 milligrams per litre out, right? Just a tiny bit, because the sodium in tailwind is maybe 400 milligrams per litre, depending on how you mix it. And over 3, 4, 5 hours, that's not a problem. Over 6, 7, 8, you've created a big enough deficit for your body to be out of kilter. And generally, and the weird thing is, the symptoms of hypo and hypernatremia are identical. So you're like, oh, which one is it? Is it too much or too little? I don't know. But you get this just pooling a liquid in the stomach is the one of the big tells for me, because it's sitting in there and it just can't get processed. And that's an electrolyte issue. And people, I don't believe it's linked to cramping. I think cramping's asking your muscles to do too much. And then, if you're dehydrated, it's easy to ask them to do too much. But I think cramping that's what you do. It could be a big step. It could be a bomb in a descent a bit, and then you cramp because you've asked the muscles to do more than they're capable of doing. But I do think it's linked to this nausea and sickness we get, because a lot more people are relying on fluids for their intake, for their energy intake. So we're actually taking on more fluid than we usually would, because we're like, well, I've got to get me fuel in, so I'm just glugging the drinks. But we're not taking into account that, and over a few hours, it's not a problem, right? But actually, each time, and the body's great, right? Because the body will be like, oh, I'm low on electrolytes, I'm low on salt, so I'll start craving salty foods. It's another symptom. right? And that in a day-to-day like setting, our cravings, our thirst, will help us rebalance, right? Because we're not in a rush. But an ultramarathon is not a normal thing. Our cravings and our thirst over the course of so many hours, it's not quick enough. It's not reactive enough to us to go, well, because you're still depleting it. And you might still be taking on more fluids. You might be getting that balance more out, and you're craving some salty crisps, right? So you have a cut of crisps while still glugging down something that's making the problem worse. And yeah, so like dehydration, people say doesn't affect performance. But you look at the studies behind that. They're done on marathons. You look at, Gabriel Haile Selassie. He was dehydrated by like a huge percentage over the course of 2 hours. Yeah. And it didn't have a huge, he finished faster because it's 2 hours. We're ultra runners, and actually over the course of the longer, if you're dehydrated, it's just gonna mess you up. And that's the thing. So if you do it just to first, people say just do it to first. First is a mechanism. For me, again, I don't know how, if there's papers or evidence behind this. This is more of a thought process. But our first will help us over the course of a marathon, right? Because we're not gonna get to an extent where there's a problem. But over the course of an ultra, it's not a strong enough mechanism for us to right that balance, because we're just constantly diving down. And by the time you're thirsty, and you're thirsty for the next 8 hours, and you just keep sipping, it's just getting more, and very individual as well. This is
I one thing I notice when it goes like that though is like my stomach just comes out, and I find it even hard. And I don't know whether it's a misbalance of me actually just not able to take the suffering. So I'm all of a sudden starting to buck everything in there. I'm like, give me something that's going to help me through this. And then I overfuel.
So for me, because the stomach drains better when it's got a bit in there. When it's actually working, if you do take too little, it doesn't, like this, you want a little bit in there for the stomach to empty. But if it's just sitting in there, sounds like you described, for me, that's the electrolyte imbalance. And because it works through osmosis, through the stomach lining, and because what's going in there is not the right concentration, it's like, well, mate, you ain't coming in. So it just sits in there, and you're like, you either vomit, or you just sit there and you stop taking everything in, because you're like, well, I can't, it's just sitting in my stomach. So again, advice I would give to you is, one, look at how much electrolytes you're taking on with your tailwind over the 8 hours, right? And compare that to how much fluid you're looking at. And then, so how many milligrams of sodium? And so you've got magnesium, potassium, other electrolytes, but sodium's the main one that we have issues with, right? Look at that, compare, and look how much you're getting in per litre, not per hour, but per litre you're taking on board. And then, if you can, situation or any kind of physiological, like university lab, can do a sweat sodium test. Look at the concentration of the sodium in your sweat. Or you go on the website and it'll give you a bit of advice, and it'll say, well, is your clothing salty after a run? You're potentially a salty sweater. I like to use...
my eyebrows are white, so it's a bit of a telltale.
So there you go. So you're likely looking at 1,000 milligrams plus of sodium you're losing per litre of sweat. And the thing you want to get sure is the stuff coming in matches that. So you drink more, you make sure you're taking on a few more electrolytes. You drink less, to say you're running through the night, and that's why I don't do it per hour, because during the night your fluid intake might drop. If you kept pumping the same amount of sodium in. A good test as well is if after a run, if you've got a dog or a friend's got a dog and the dog goes apeshit for licking your legs, you're also a salty sweater. If a dog comes up and licks you and then goes, sorry mate, and walks away, you've probably got a much lower sodium. That's not as scientific, but I would look at that.
What about miles then for a 100-mile race? Quality over quantity.
You should do 100 of them.
Yeah. In your training blocks then, quality over quantity. I was looking at the Strava stats the other day. Well, somebody actually sent me theirs through, so I thought I'd take a look at my own. And like the year I got all my PBs was the year I'd done the least amount of, that's marathon PBs. And I'm not a fast marathon, around 3:29, around that sort of time. Well, 3:15, it just didn't happen, but...
like my 15:25.
Yeah. And it was the least amount of miles I'd ever run in a year. But yeah, I still knocked all my PBs out of the park that year. Like, when you're doing 100 miles, do you think there's a sort of set amount of miles you should be getting to on a week-to-week basis.
Why do you think that your best marathon time coming that year? Are there other factors that might be linked to it?
Well, there were some other factors. I did do an Ironman that year, which sort of helps. I was doing a lot on the bike, and my overall fitness was a bit. But to be honest, though, I was
training more than ever.
No, it wasn't actually, because when I'd done the Ironman, I took it as a rest. Believe it or not, I didn't do much running at all. I did New York Marathon, and I think it was London Marathon that year as well. And a few other marathons bucked in there. But I didn't actually do any training plans. You know, even when I'd done the Ironman, I'd done maybe 1 20-mile run every other week. I actually took it as a rest from running. But I was doing about 200 miles a week on the bike. So my overall aerobic fitness, I suppose, I only done like 800 miles for the year. You know, that was nothing. And I'd done
you did 10,000 miles on the bike.
Yeah, so I was doing quite a lot on the bike, like so. So what about that question? There's a different question. Do you think the cycling will improve your times?
I'll tell you next year. So I came off the bike after 2 months off last year and ran a half marathon PB. And this year, 12 months on the bike, I was 2 minutes slow over the same half marathon. I think over the 12 months, I wasn't running at all and I lost conditioning. So I was fitter, but I just couldn't run as fast. I mean, at the moment, I'm trying to build my leg speed up a bit more and strengthen the legs. I look at stuff in terms of time. I think it works really well for not mileage. Time is much more an indicator of the training you're doing and measure it. And there's all different ways you can measure it. I was chatting to a couple of other coaches today, actually, about how we measure the overall training load. Even just in runners, let alone like people that cycle, swim, train as well. But I mean, I look at my Strava stats for the year, and it's my biggest year ever. I've done 850 hours of training, which is like 16 hours a week. But that does include the slow cycling alongside Dan, so I might have to remove that. It's if you look at the overall volume, because you could do mileage alone, right? And you got someone who lives at the foot of Slieve Donard, and they just run up and down that every day, and they go, I only did 5k a day. Oh yeah, good one. Yeah, with 1,000 meters in or something. And if you look at time, it's a smaller way of taking that into account. And at a very basic level, for many of us, there'll be a stint of just running a little bit more. If you're only going out 2-3 times a week, you're looking at trying to build up the consistency. So the consistency is one of the biggest things. And then it's asking that question, what kind of volume can I sustain consistently? Right, and finding that answer. And also, you're going to benefit from the variety in there. So if you've got different paces you're using, different sessions, you might periodize your training in different ways. That I like to do like a reverse periodization. So the further out from a race you are, the less specific your training is. So then as you get closer and closer, you're doing more around that specific area that you're working on. And this is for a marathon. It's a lot easier because the marathon work you do in the final kind of block is still really high quality because you're running at marathon pace. With a 24-hour 100-miler, doesn't mean that 4 weeks out you'll just do all your. I actually listened to Zach Bitter's podcast about his 24-hour training, and you could tell before he did the race why he was so. I'd love to chat to him about it. I feel like I'm talking behind the man's back because I listened to his podcast, but. He was knackered because he was doing all his training at the 24-hour pace after that, and just lots of it. And yeah, so the longer the race, the less it becomes just about doing it. So everyone get the slow pace you're doing. I think you still got to keep that variety in there, but the consistency is the main thing. So if you can only do 30 miles a week, and because it's not just what mileage you're doing, it's what mileage you're doing on top of your job. On top of your family life, do you work shifts where you lose nights of sleep? Have you got a newborn, right? So like, yeah, it's all well and good going, well, sorry, you can't do that 100 mile unless you do 50 miles a week. And you've got a newborn, so mainly you're just practicing your sleep deprivation. So that's going to help, right? But it's like, it's fitting in how much you can do sustainably within your own context, within your lifestyle. So I got athletes I coach with a range of like distances and a range of lifestyles, and they all do very different training plans. There's some kind of underlying like parts of my training philosophy that they'll all kind of. But if you've got a bunch of them together and ask them now, like, what does Robbie harp on about? It's consistency and nutrition, unfortunately. But the variety is the other thing I put in there. So it's just.
So they've already heard this podcast then. They don't need to listen.
Oh, they just get me whining on about it all the time.
But you are right though. Like last year, I did CCC, by the way, in case I didn't mention it. But
did you? Which one's that? Is that where is that, in the Alps?
But I could only fit in 35 miles a week. But I'm lucky here. I live at the foot of the Mourne Mountains. I'm actually a tour guide in the mountains, so I bring a lot of people up. There's me plugging.
Do you include those
Mourne Mountain Adventures?
Hiking with a group?
I didn't previous year. This year I did. Because I had an injury in my foot this year, so I had a plantar plate tear, so I couldn't do much running at all. But looking at Strava the other day, I'd done 310 feet for every mile that I'd done this year, so I'd done around 900 miles, I suppose. Wasn't much. But my legs were really, really strong. Obviously 310 feet per mile.
I guess if you're guiding, you'll have a pack, right? With a bit more kit and stuff, a bit more weight, a bit of extra water.
Yeah, so the mountains, when I took that off, it was great. The unfortunate thing was I didn't have the cardio with it. I did listen to a podcast of yours about 6 weeks ago. I can't remember what it was. And I was actually, oh shit, why did I not get on the bike? I couldn't run. But to your point, though, it's about getting the right consistency, but the right balance of what you're trying to do. Strength in my legs wasn't enough for the race, and I needed to have some level of cardio so I could actually push a bit of time out.
I guess if you're getting to a point there where you've got to a race like the CCC and you haven't been able to get the training in that you've wanted, you've done a lot more hiking with a pack and stuff like that, because that's just your situation at that time, and we can't just pick and choose when we want to do races, and especially at the moment, like you just jump at any race there is. Then play to your strengths, right? CCC, for example, you hike that with purpose from the start, and then try and use the kind of the next, like the downhills and the steady bits, just to keep moving well, and understanding that what you're used to as a pace is different because your cardiovascular fitness isn't there, but you're strong and you can make sure you're eating better. Then you play to your strengths and you get the best out of yourself on the day. We might not get the best out of that we wanted, like the year at the beginning of the year. We've set ourselves these goals, these time targets and stuff. But I mean, like half the time, the race itself, in the Alps, the weather decides whether you're going to get your time target anyway. Oh, you'd like to run in 24 hours? Oh, great. Well, we're going to shut it down with rain. And like the CCC anyway, part of the joy of that one, this is a really good example of that one, because from the first 2K in, you're above 1,800 meters. So the altitude is going to make you all feel knackered anyway, right? And you don't drop below 1,700 until you get to La Foulée, which is 45K in, at which point the temperature is about 35 degrees. So you still feel like crap. So it's kind of like, well, yeah, my cardiovascular fitness isn't there, but I'm going to feel like crap for the first 40, 50 miles anyway. So I'm just going to deal with it and hike it. And as key for ultra runners is perception of your own effort. And it changes. If we're coming back from injury, our perception of effort isn't just the messages coming up from the body. This is my heart rate. I've just dialed in. We use our peers. We look at our friends that we run with and go, hold on a second, I'm normally ahead of Johnny. So I must be going easy, or I must be working too hard, or if we're running into a headwind, we adjust it on how quick we get to a sign that we pass, or how good we feel. So it's our perception of that effort is varied. So if you can dial into that, especially coming back from an injury, or if you're just a bit less fit, a bit unfit. Just accepting that everything's a little bit slower, but it's in the right place. Doing your tempo runs that last year you might have been doing at X pace, to this year you're doing the same workout, you're getting the benefits you need from that session. It's a little bit slower right now. Hopefully, if you try and get that same pace you did last year, one, you're going to be disappointed and you're going to work too hard, and the next day you're going to be kippered, right? If you do it properly and try and work at the right level, and that's not just using a heart rate, it's just getting control of your perception, or getting a good understanding of your own perception of effort, your training is going to be more consistent. You'll go, the next week is going to improve a little bit more. But also, when it comes to race day, you can be more dialed in. And that doesn't just work for where you are in the race. It works for if you're at altitude, if the temperature's warmer than usual, and we have to adjust. We can't just there are formulas. You can go, well, actually, for for 7 degrees warmer, actually you should slow your pace. Put this. There are formulas for that, right? How does that work in this coming down into La Foule? You just like, all right, yeah, sorry, I should be going 17 seconds per kilometre slower. Oh well, blimey. Like, it doesn't. So our perception of effort is still the best measure. If you can get it right, and it comes with experience, and sometimes it comes with absolutely getting it horribly wrong and learning from it. If you keep getting it horribly wrong and repeating, that's not learning. If you get it horribly wrong and you experiment it, and that's why I think it's good for people running ultras to do 5Ks, half marathons, because you can work on that perception of effort. You're working on, okay, what's the right effort level for this 5K, this 10K? And you can get it wrong with a lot less of a consequence than getting it wrong for a 100 miler. If you get that wrong for the 100 miler, if you want to see people doing that, go to the Thames Bath 100 first. Like, it's like in May every year, and it's warm, and at the first checkpoint, or even at James Elston's Centurion races, the North Downs 100, Box Hill, 26.2 miles. People are cooked, and you're like, there's 75 miles to go. Yeah, no, I feel great. So I can tell you're not. I can look at you. My perception of your effort is up here. You're an 8 or a 9 out of 10, and you should be a 5 or a 6. And it, like, work on that. And part of that's getting it wrong. Part of it is being that guy at Box Hill going, oh yeah, blimey, I got that so wrong. I finished. It took me twice as long as I wanted, but next year, I'll know. Or you can be the guy at, wait, how far were you getting into races? 8 hours in, and you go, yeah, it's just the food gods. It's not my fault. It's nothing to do with me. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have the same tailwind and shot blocks next time. I'm going to repeat it, and then hopefully I'll get to 9 hours this time.
And you made me hesitate there. Fuck, he's right.
He's got
bollocks him. Bollocks him.
He's a dickhead, but he's right.
You moved over to Chamonix then, so
we was there, yeah.
UTM.
We were there for 3 or 4 years. It was basically I ran UTMB in 2648 or something, based in the UK. And I thought to make the next step, I had to go out there. So we went over there for summer. There was 4 of us and a dog in this 1-bed like apartment. And we were like, it was the only way we could afford to do it. And it was me, my wife Natalie, our friend Mael Backhausen, and our other friend Paul Navesey. And we just went like, sod it, all in. And both me and Paul DNF'd our races. Mael had a good race. I think he was
bad nutrition.
22nd in the year. So mine was psychology, funnily enough. It was to do with wanting to be further ahead in the field than I was. And I was still in the top 30 when I quit. I was physically fine. I was eating, I was drinking, I was overtaking people on that final descent knowing I was going to stop. I just wasn't happy with it. And I part of it, I think I learned a lot from that. I did learn a lot from it. It was my first ever DNF. And it wasn't for any other reason. I thought it'd be like screaming and vomiting and broken ankles and stuff like that, and it was just, I wasn't happy with where I was. And if I'd have focused more on what I was doing at that moment in time, I could have carried on and done well and been happy with my lot. But actually, in hindsight, it was a valuable lesson at the right time. So
something you carry forward with you. Why do you think that was then? Was it just the amount of effort that you put in and the amount of commitment that you'd done? We'd
moved out there. I almost probably felt like I had the right to do better than I was doing because I'd made that jump. I'd read the books about the cyclists in the 60s and 70s going over to France and living out of a tiny hut, and I'm old romantic in that regard. If you just eat bread and cheese and just try your best and train your socks off and get to the start line, and the rest of it will take care of itself. And actually, yeah, I let myself be too bothered about things that were outside of my control. And I think we still do it. I still do it now.
Another opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
But it's difficult. It's difficult for the Brits, though, isn't it? Like, because you're going over there. You've got the Italians and the French and these guys that have been living on the mountains for years. Like,
you live on the mountains.
Yeah,
I'm from London. Like, what are you doing? I'm from London. The biggest hill we had nearby was called Old Hill, and it took about 2 minutes to get up. You got like
there's a new hill at the beginning.
Steep climb. Yeah, it was It was new before before the Victorians.
Yeah, no, like, we are lucky here. We're lucky here. We can do 10,000 feet in 6-7 miles. Was probably like not an issue.
Steep as anything, rough as arseholes. I ran.
I was talking about you, not me. Old Hill.
Yeah, all right. I just think it's easier to take that kind of because there's plenty of examples of like Lizzie Hawker, Jez Bragg, who've done
Damien Hall.
brilliant, like Damien Hall, the other year, Andy Simmons, Tom Owens, Beth Pascal. We've got loads of Brits who've excelled at the mountain races, and it's not just because they've trained in the mountains. And yeah, they've got to that level. And again, you've got to remember the sport has increased as we've gone through. It's got better. Just to tread water, you've got to improve every year because the sports is getting stronger and stronger. But like the first time I did UTMB, I trained on my main session was continuous hills, 45 or Kenyan hills, you call it, like 3 by 10 minutes, 45 to 60 seconds up and down this tarmac road, just trying to condition my quads in Haywards Heath in Sussex, this Liverpool, and that's how I was training for it. And I did all right, didn't do great, but it's kind of like, I think we can either focus on what we've got in front of us and kind of bemoan that it's not like the Europeans up in the mountains and all that stuff. We got bloody Tao Geoghegan. She's a Londoner who's just won the Giro d'Italia. Like if he can do that, then we got no excuses now.
That's
can't be to do with our.
Just took the words out off the end of my tongue there. Stop with excuses, guys. There's ways around it.
Look for the reasons why we can do well at it. What makes you? What gives you an edge?
Do you think there has been a shift in ultra running there in the last couple of years?
Last couple of years? I mean, we're still not as good as we were in the 80s, but we're getting there. It's always quite fun to listen to some of the American podcasts and stuff, and we're just at the top of the game now. And you're like, actually, you look back at the likes of Don Ritchie, Eleanor Robinson, Hilary Walker, Jeff Norman. He's like a 2:12, 2:11 marathoner. He's the 50k world record on the track until recently, and it took someone in super shoes in a random set up race to break his record. And these are people that were just going out and running hard. Like Don Ritchie's book, "If the Stubborn Scotsman," reading that is an endurance effort in its own. It needed someone to edit it, but it was his diary of his training, and it's laborious reading how hard he worked on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. But we are improving. We're seeing, and one of the reasons is the health of the American collegiate system. It's churning out these runners that are breaking 14 minutes for 5k and being told, sorry mate, you're not good enough for a pro deal. And the females that are kind of breaking 16 minutes and also being told the same thing. So they go, well, I'm going to go run on the trails. It's you could probably easier. I like friends of a guy called Hayden Hawks, who's a US runner. He's legit rapid over the 5k, right? I think he's 13:50 something when he left college, and he was good. And if he was in the UK, he'd probably have been saying, right, you stick to the 5k and you keep working on that. In America, he's like, well, I could be 10th at the nationals, or I can go and be even better at the ultra running. So we're seeing the health of that American collegiate system, just pumping in these super competitive fast runners. Same with other sports in Europe. The cycling's improving, so there are more people that have come from cycling, from ski mountaineering, from running. I don't think it's not as much in the UK that we're seeing the fast runners stepping up. We're seeing the likes of Dan Nash, who won the 50k champs, Ali Dixon come out, and they're both. Dan was second, I think, or third in the British record, and Ali won. And she's a 2:29 marathoner stepping up to the ultra. She's promised she's never going to do it again, but she will, hopefully. But you're seeing the people coming into this more. But there's still, if you're a 2:29 marathoner as a female in the UK, you're knocking on the door of an Olympic team. If you're a 2:29 marathon in the US, you're thinking, well, there's 8 girls ahead of me in the pecking order. Should I maybe try the 50k world champs to get that national best? And that quality then brings everyone else has to up their game. I think the Americans, we do owe them that. Oh, God. And especially all that, you can tell the joy when a Frenchman or a Spaniard, it's just like Luis Alberto, when they get, because obviously a lot of Americans, they talk a big game, right? And they come in we're going to smash this race. And then Javier Fevenard, who's for some reason always written off. Yeah, that little geezer from the Jura, no chance. He repeatedly wins these races because he's just, that's what he's training for specifically, and he's bloody good. It's I guess, but they have to up their game because there's more people coming from overseas that are faster, and we've got to up our game.
Yeah.
Because we just want to tread water and keep enjoying the races. get the odd podium.
There seems to be a lot of learning that's going on, though, isn't it, over the last few years? Everybody's sort of
The
learning off.
nutrition's changed.
Yeah, everybody's learning off each other. The
We kind of,
backyard's a good
you know,
example of that.
there's another whole different theory. I mean, actually, it's not a new theory because it was Robert Barclay Allardyce did 1,000 miles in like 100 days or something, 1 mile an hour back in 1876. Something ridiculous. So it's not a new idea. It is a good idea. It does intrigue me. But I think the nutrition's. I keep harking on about it, but it has changed because the beta fuel and the Morton and just the improvement in nutrition has meant that more people who are fast. We could usually rely on these fast guys coming up, deciding they were going to destroy everything, failing at the first ultra because they couldn't get the fueling right, and then pissing off back to marathon. We were all right. Us ultra was like, that's good. We got our thing. You can't eat as many sandwiches as us. Now it's a lot easier to get the nutrition right. There are more options. There's more information out there. As you say, it's a sharing of knowledge. Because it's not a big secret thing. I'm happy to share my knowledge with as many people, as fast people as possible. Because if you want to do well, you've got to have the competition. You want to beat the best out there. So you just help them a little bit if they want.
So you do a lot of coaching. You've quite a few athletes that you coach. If I was coming to you, my next race next year, although I'm injured, is the Dolomites 120k Lavaredo.
Okay.
Don't know if it's going to happen or not. But if I was coming to you, what type of things would you look at, and how would you structure that?
With your nutrition. I've already told you this. Blimey, your electrolytes. We'll get that sorted.
Yeah.
We'll get you uninjured first. To be fair.
Yeah.
Because that's the first thing you got to sort out is that injury, because otherwise you can't train. So
Yeah,
whatever it takes to.
Yeah, you have hit the nutrition obviously very hard there, and to be fair, I think it's one of the first times it's come out in the podcast. This is like episode 135. You're making up for all the other 134.
I'm only halfway through nutrition.
I would say, it is something that is really overlooked by people, big time.
It's massively, and if you want to improve, there you go. You can improve the pace you can run. But if you're not getting the nutrition right, you're eventually going to tail off. Or you can stick with the pace you run or improve it a slight and get the nutrition right so you don't tail off.
Are you a running coach or a nutritional coach?
I am a coach. I'm an ultra distance coach. I coach. Yeah, it's always holistic. You got to coach everything. I'm a life coach. I'm a psychology coach. I'm a everything coach. I help my athletes with whatever they need help with.
But that's what ultra running is all about, though, isn't it? Psychology. There's so much of it's in the mind. So much you have to be physically fit. You need to get balance. Balance, I find, is the hardest thing when you're maintaining, as you said, that workload, kids, X, Y, and Z.
Like what you meant,
on the ball. Yeah.
That's why I keep going slightly higher up.
And But you are right. It's very much a holistic, and there's that word discipline comes into that. If you're keeping that discipline and that consistency, then you start to see the results.
And it's again, even discipline comes into motivation or your perceived effort. Because if you're working too hard on every single run, it's harder to motivate to go out for the next run. But also, if your work is crazy, and you're not addressing that, then it affects your ability to go out and get out on those runs as well. So it's kind of, it all comes into it. If you're a coach, you have to, I don't know, if your athlete can't tell you, or you don't ask them, how's work? And they go, actually, I'm working really long hours because we lost someone with COVID for 2 weeks, and I'm working from home, and although the commute's gone, I used to run my commute, so I can't run on the commute anymore. I just get out of bed and I'm working all these hours a day. And what affects your performance? Well, that's the root of the cause. And you can't solve these problems for these athletes, but you can help them ask those questions. And as a coach, you just got to ask them the right questions and just be there it's all about communication. You got to ask, you just got to say, all right, well, tell me. And if an athlete trusts you, but my dissertation for the masters was I did a pilot project with how do we measure success within a coach-athlete relationship in ultra running. And one of the things that came out was longevity of the relationships. Because if you just measure it off results, right? Say you get a fast runner comes to a coach, And this coach, say, I'm going to use this numbers, like let's say they're a 2:30 marathon, right? And then they win a bunch of races. But actually, the coaching wasn't good. They're now a 2:35 marathoner, and they're winning all these races because they would have won them anyway, right? Does that mean that's successful coaching? And then the athlete buggers off because they weren't happy about it, but the coach would go, well, they won all these races while I was coaching. Or if you look at the longevity of the relationship, there has to be that improvement, right? Because that's what, as we started with, that's what you're searching for. You enjoy that. If it's not there, and it doesn't have to be a linear improvement, right? It might be that you're helping, a coach is helping you improve after you've lost your job and you've picked up an injury and you've had a newborn, but then they've helped you. So it's not linear, but if you stuck with the coach, it's a good sign. It measures the other things, that the communication's good, the honesty's there. So then the next project, the dissertation, was what leads to longevity. And one of the big things was trust. So the first thing I would do with you as an athlete is ask you why you're into ultra running. What do you want to get out of it? What are your long-term goals? Start getting an idea of why the athletes come to coaching in the first place and what they expect of it. Because if they come and they expect to be given a plan and just follow that verbatim and be a faster runner, then they're not getting as much out of the coaching as they might. If they followed it, something you get signed up for coaching, I want to coach. You're a good coach, right? So I'm going to give you the money and I want to get faster, but I'm not going to listen to anything you say. I'm going to just train how I want to train. I'm like, hey, yeah, good one. That's not how it works. I think it's paying a coach doesn't make you faster, listening to one does, or communicating with one does. So yeah, that's how it works. You just start talking and start chatting about all different bits and bobs. And then Lavaredo, if you want one nice tip, is just make sure you don't smash your quads on the downhills, because they're runnable. They're really runnable the whole way through that race, especially in the first half. And people, they go, I'll make up time on the downhill because I'm fast on the downhill. If you live in the mountains, you're probably quite fast on the downhill. And you get to halfway and there's a long flat bit. You get to a checkpoint and everyone's just kind of hobbling in. Oh, you all right? So, yeah, I bombed the first couple of downhills. Now I can't walk. Oh, good. Nice one. Well done. What are you going to do? I'm going to walk the rest of the way. Good. Right.
That's one thing you learn. You see these races and there's 20,000 feet of elevation. You soon learn it's the descending that's the problem, not the elevation. That's where you trash your quads.
My wife's she's former English and British fell running champion. So she went from, her longest race she'd done was 60k, and she signed over a bet. We signed up for the Tour de France, and she was like, "Can I do this?" And I was like, "You know what? The thing that stops 9 out of 10 people in the Tour de France, take nutrition aside."
We've done that.
Nutrition and poor pacing on the first climb aside, is the descents, because you just batter your quads. She is such an efficient descender. I can run down the hill at the same pace as her, but I know from a muscular point of view, it's costing me so much more. I'm smashing my quads just to be at the same pace as her, and she just glides. It's just really, so if you're looking at some of the longer races, one of the reasons I think Kilian Jornet is better than a lot of the people, and you see even the likes of Luis Alberto and Ando, is they treat the downhill like they do in the cross country, like they do in the ski mountaineering. It's a recovery. They're still fast. Don't get me wrong. He's going downhill fast, right? Because he's brilliant, but he's still not going at full pelt, and he's also very efficient. So he's gliding around the corner. He's not slamming on the brakes to go around every other rock. He's not kind of jumping around things, because he's going in a controlled enough manner that he can just glide down the hill. And it's a recovery. So you come to the next climb. You look at when he did Mont Blanc Marathon with Stian Engelman Vic and Max King. I got a video, slow-mo of him running down, and Max is smashing it. He's a sub 2:15 marathoner. He's fast, but every single descent, Stian and Kilian are recovering, and Max is smashing himself to stay with him. And he's ahead, and they're just jogging. They're literally jogging behind him in the downhills. It's weird to watch.
Is it just technique then? Is that what you think it is? Is that something to look at?
Purposeful practice. There's it's the one element where, the idea of 10,000 hours of practice. If you look at the original research of that, Anders Ericsson, it wasn't, the 10,000 numbers was plucked out because that was the thing to write about, right? But it wasn't actually the number that mattered. It was the quality of that practice. It was purposeful. So there was a range of people who got to world class in these different disciplines, and it was the amount of purposeful practice they put in. So if you're going to go out and you want to work on your downhill, you've got to look at, every time you run downhill, it's an opportunity to just think about how you're doing it. And when we have a training camps, we've had a training camp in Chamonix a few times, we get people come and we just slow them down. Right? Because if you're running as fast as you can downhill, You get to a junction, you get to a rock, you've got to go, you slam on the brakes, right? And you're stopping, you're starting, you're building up that load in your quads and your calves because you're slamming the brakes on. If you're going a little bit slower, right, within your comfort zone, maybe not slow, maybe slow is not the right word. If you're more within your comfort zone, you see what's ahead of you, you move around it, you go over it, you go round the bend without slamming on the brakes as much. You create less muscular damage. So therefore, the next descent, you're in better shape. But actually, you're also going downhill. We had people going downhill quicker when they slowed down because they were running fast like this, left, right, round things. And you're like, just slow down and go straight. It's a quicker route. And it was enough difference to be like, oh, I'm going slower, but I'm getting here quicker. Yeah, because you're not jumping around everything like a rabbit or something, like just bouncing around.
It's just a cumulative fatigue, isn't it, in your legs? That's what it is. That's where you
can look at people. Like you can look at increasing your cadence because the smaller steps might help with having less damage to the legs. But actually, I've seen people run downhill that the cadence it's big steps, but they're in control. They're not smashing the brakes on, and it's just think about what you're doing and how you can improve it, how you can make it more efficient.
Yeah. Some of the local fell runners, I'm sure your wife's the same as well. Like, they're just crazy anyway, but and you're so much more prone to injury, taking it so tentative down. They keep on saying to me, look further ahead, stop looking at your feet, look to see where you're going and just relax a bit more. That's the hardest thing to do, is just actually relax.
But so that's why, like Natalie and I, we give advice out about running downhill. But Nats has been running like a furrow from the age of 9 on the fells. Look further ahead. Yeah, I'd love to look further ahead, but I'm terrified about the rocks just in front of my feet. Great, yeah, just float, mate. Just float down the hill like I've done since the age of 4. Oh, brilliant! Cheers for that. Right, I've gone from being a shit downhill runner, Paul, to a average downhill runner, and I think. How do you get your eyes further ahead? You slow down, right? So therefore, you're more in comfort to actually look at, and it's all bits about chunking information together. So if your brain's looking down, like the first time you run down a rocky hill, right? If you're not a good downhill runner, you're seeing each individual rock, and you're working out how to go around each individual one. And as you develop that skill, you're more likely to see a series of rocks and and think how to move around all of them. Because your brain has learned to chunk that information together, and it goes back to the 10,000 hours idea. That's what it's done. It's gone from the violinists plucking. There you go. There's my musical knowledge. Each kind of a string. yeah, chords. Yeah, then they learn about chords, which is 2 strings, or whatever. You start chunking this information together, and all of a sudden you're making wonderful noises. But that's what we do. We have to develop our ways to interpret what's ahead of us, and some of it comes down to proprioception and and you can bypass that maybe by chucking on some chunky shoes and ignoring everything, but that's just almost like tarmacking the descent, right? Yeah, you're going to go down it faster, but you might well smash your legs a bit more. I think slowing down and think, how can I look further ahead? I've got to slow down, right? And practicing it. You don't have to be 100% outside your comfort zone to get better. You could be 1 or 2%. Because then you become comfortable 1 or 2% outside that comfort zone, and you go 1 or 2% further. And far from a fell runner saying, "Oh, we just switch off our brains." Their brain is so active they don't even know about it, because there's every time you run down a fell, it's a different. You can run down the same line and it's a different experience, right? Because it's the bog's slightly different, the tufts of grass are different. So every downhill run they do, every one they've done for all their life, even if they're switching off, they're processing so much information, they're practicing so much, and it's even just the information coming through their feet, like the proprioception of what's happening underneath them. They've practiced it again and again and again and again. So the idea of someone saying just switch your brain off and go faster
and just relax,
it's the opposite of what they're doing.
And just relax.
Yeah, relax. Yeah, but relax might be slowing down.
So
because when they're relaxed, their brain is working in overdrive because it's processing so much information that I don't know your sending abilities, but I've got to look at as 10 different bits of information, whereas they're looking further ahead, because those 10 rocks that I've just seen and I'm trying to figure out a way around, they see one section of trail or fell that they're moving through. So there's more information. So slow it down. And again, if you're running up and down one mountain, you just doesn't matter what state your quads are at the bottom, right? If you're running up and down several mountains, it's good to save your quads for that final descent.
Yeah. If somebody was looking coached by yourself, how do they get in contact?
You can find me on social media, Ultra Britain. I'm working with a full roster of athletes. I don't like to take on too many. So I haven't got any space for them to do at the moment. But if someone would like to get in contact, you drop me an email. My website is robbiebritton.co.uk. If I might not have space, but I work with a couple of other coaches that are include my wife and a few other people that I can recommend. There's a good group of coaches in the UK and Ireland, and I've helped quite a few. Just point me in the right direction. So if you are looking for a coach, you want a bit of advice, drop me an email via there, and I can maybe point you towards the right kind of coach. You've got the likes of Paul Tierney and Sarah McCormack doing wonderful things. Donnie Campbell, Paul Giblin and James Stewart up in Scotland. There's a whole bunch of, and I work with the Centurion team as well, so you can go on the website there, and we've got me, James Elfton, Sophie Grant, Neil Bryant and Edwina Sutton. So there's plenty of places, there's plenty of great coaches out there, but take the time to find the right coach for you.
It is important though, isn't it? A coach, like it can really progress your running so much.
Yeah,
without
definitely. I think you can help. I mean, in a very simple level, I've made so many mistakes over the years. I can help you avoid some of them. But it holds you accountable. It makes it seem more manageable, right? Because someone else has thought about it and said, this is what you've got to do. You haven't got to second guess your own training. You haven't got to kind of wonder if you're improving enough for race day. You've got someone else who's worried about that for you. And all of a sudden, that week ahead is, well, this is the right thing to do. It's achievable because the coach has set me an achievable plan. And yeah, I'm going to get to where I want to get. I can trust in the process, and it's trusting that coach. I'd have to add as well, I've just finished writing a book that I've done the first draft. It's out next year.
What's it
in
called?
the autumn. 1,001 running tips. So you don't need a coach, just get that. It's full of my gibberish.
Will it be on Amazon?
I believe it will be. Yeah, it's via Vertebrae Publishing, who just published Ali Bevan's Broken, the one about all the FKTs this year. And so I don't know if I'm supposed to talk, I think I can talk about it. But yeah, I've just finished writing the first draft. And it talks about all of what I've talked about today, but also like finding and getting the most out of coaching, or if you're writing your own plan and how you can adapt things to fit yourself. Because not everyone can afford a coach or wants a coach. But there's so much garbage on the internet. It's kind of, as you say, everything's individual. So if you download
there's a lot of false advertising on. That's the problem with the internet, isn't it? Like they're trying to suck you down this road and this path.
Oh, God.
I remember when I started, and I was going for like a 6-mile run, and I was having my Lucozade and my jelly beans, and I was like, right, let's go for this 6-mile run. And you wouldn't go out without your Powerade. But you do learn, obviously, as you go through. One thing I'm going to challenge people that are listening to this is take a look at your nutrition plan, and if you haven't got one, then that could be the problem.
Just look at what you're taking on board each hour, and try and aim. I mean, the study 80. If you're going in the ultras, 80 to 90 grams of carbs is probably around the gold standard. But they had a study last year looking at Spanish ultra runners, and they took on over 120 grams of carbs per hour. Right, and the way they measured it was they looked at muscle damage markers. So they had a group taking on 60, 90, and 120, and there was less muscle damage in the ones taking 120. So they had sufficient fuel and they weren't breaking down their muscles whilst they were running. But is one simple way of looking at it. But that's an exception, right? That's probably, I think in the race there was the likes of Luis Alberto Hernando, and he's a big geezer. If you're a 90 kilogram like chap, and then you're trying to, and you've got a 45 kilogram female runner, it's totally different. You can't just say, well, they've said I need to do this many. Find out what works for you, and especially with the female runners as well. There's a lot of the research is very male centric, and there's some good apps like the Fitter Woman app that can give you an idea of how your nutritional demands might change over the course of your menstrual cycle as well. So actually, there's a whole different, like for females, there's less information, less research. And it's because it's more complicated, people have copped out of doing the research. Oh, can't handle that. But it's kind of, you could start looking at that, and that's one thing to kind of look at yourself. It's very individual. Because depending on when you're racing, you might have a higher utilization of stored body fats or a higher demand for carbohydrates based on where you are within your cycle. So there's whole things like that. You can get into a whole rabbit hole in nutrition, but find out what you're doing, what works for you, and see if you can tweak and improve it.
Excellent. You've obviously learned a lot over the last couple of years yourself, and your running was so successful in your earlier years. You're only a young ultra runner, like you're only a young chappie, really.
34.
34 years of age. So when did you come? What year was that? 2015 or 14? Turin, when you.
Turin was 2015.
2015. So you're a really young ultra runner running at that pace. Like, I know we had Johan Steen on the podcast as well. He's one of my favorite ultra runners.
He's a good man.
Yeah, really breaks it down mentally. I think
cerebral.
Yeah, he come. I think it was 18th, around that 16th or 18th. You came third. With was it 260, around 162 miles or so?
261k, 162 miles on that.
Yeah. So you've got all of this.
I know. You know what I remember exactly? I was 40 meters short a second.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Like, how does that happen? Like, how does that happen? Do you know that's happening at the time?
I finished. Basically, we until the final hour, I didn't know what position I was in, but I knew that we were in the team gold position. So that was our focus. And I was running with Paddy Robbins, and we were working together to secure the team gold. And in the last hour, when we were about 17k ahead, we were like, we're safe now. So I then found out I was 10th, 9th. I know I was 6th. I was 6th at that point, and they gave me people to chase. I just went wild. This goes back to that perception effort, because I wasn't going super fast, but I was going faster than everyone else, so I felt like I was amazing. So I was just chasing everyone. I was running as fast as I could. I think I finished with a 3:23 marathon at the final of that race.
Jesus, that's crazy.
So I was just, it was brilliant. Absolutely wonderful feeling, just chasing everyone.
So the point I was going to make there was, with all this learning that you've had since that in the last 5 years, do you think that you're going to see that develop and improve where you've been?
Look at what Johan did. Johan saw his big breakthrough in 24-hour racing when stepping up to 6-day and the longer stuff and the backyards. Maybe the backyard was after the 24s, actually, because in Belfast he was second/third. He didn't claim an extra lap that was missed out, and the guy in third did, and then it swapped round. I think he was still second. I don't know. It's up to him. But he went to 6-day racing and then come back 24s and basically just was a different man. So I like to think that if I can get my body in a place where it can run for 24, 48 hours, I think I'll use the experience I've got. I feel like I've grown as an athlete. I feel like I'm a endurance athlete, not just a runner. So building my own expertise and working with some really great athletes as well that I'm learning from. That's the other joy of coaching, is you're learning from the athletes you work with. And I'm coaching a host of athletes in the British 24-hour squad and some of the Irish internationals and like different really high caliber people, but just a whole range of people. And you learn from everyone. You learn, like, it doesn't have to be the Dan Lawsons of this world you learn from. That man, all you learn from him is you've got to just like stop caring about everything else.
But like Dan's face, he always looks broken. You know, he always pushes himself.
It's his normal face. That's his face that's got broken by life, mate.
That's classic.
He won't listen to this. I can say what I want.
Robbie, we'll wrap it up on that. Thanks very much. It's as lively as I thought it was going to be.
Wrap it up on me insulting my mate.
We have to get Dan on the podcast now. That's why I'll leave it at that.
Good luck, mate.
You insulting him, so that way he can have his own
back.
back.
Pin that man down is impossible. He loves to move. You could do there's a great video of him doing an interview whilst running, and the poor geezer, it was like a progression run for him. His Dan warmed up and got more and more excited. I was just expecting him to just fall back and Dan run off into the distance. It's brilliant.
That's excellent. Thanks very much. I appreciate that.
No
appreciate
worries.
Your time. I'll get this out on Friday.
Cool.
What do?
Start the new year.